there are people that are really jumping into that now, and that ranges from supplements that are, largely recognized as safe to drugs. A lot of people are taking rapamycin now. I can't officially recommend that, but I was just talking to Matt Kaberlein, and I would guess that maybe up to 100,000 people are taking this off label now. Um, and other people are doing things like
Welcome to the Beyond Tomorrow podcast. Today's guest is Dr. Brian Kennedy, one of the leaders in the field of aging research, the former president and CEO at the Buck Institute, and the current director at the Center for Healthy Longevity at the National University of Singapore. In this episode, we're going to uncover the latest developments in extending health span, insights into the future of longevity science, and some practical tips for improving your health today and beyond tomorrow. I hope you enjoy the episode. Let's dive in. Brian, thanks so much for being here. It's great to see you.
Oh, it's my pleasure. I'm happy to do it.
Where does one start when they think about devoting their career to the longevity, the aging space?
Well, I think it's funny. Those are like two different questions. There's the question of why I did it 35 years ago, and the question of why a young person might want to do that now. I think for me, it was I wanted to work in some aspect of biology that was important, but not really understood. And I don't know that anyone in 1990 was really that optimistic about the possibility of really slowing the aging process. But to me, that didn't really matter. I didn't really care about that. I thought, how can we have a phenomenon that happens to everyone on Earth if they live long enough? And yet we know so little about it. So that's why I got started working on yeast aging. So we took a very simple system, yeast cells, and tried to see if we could understand aging in that simple system, and that led us to the sirtuin genes, which is, very popular in the aging field now, and also mTOR pathway. So it turned out that even that simple single-celled organism could tell us something about human aging. I think if we fast forward now, though, that the opportunity to do something for humanity is so great. I mean, if we really look at what's happening now, medical care is heavily oriented towards sick care. And while that's been very successful, and I certainly want the best care when I get sick, I think we've really missed out on the opportunity to keep people healthy rather than treat them after they're sick. And the biggest risk factor to make people sick is aging, and also to cause functional decline as you get older. So I think it's very obvious now why somebody might want to go into this field if they want to have a huge impact.
I think you're just explaining to the listeners about the difference between a sick care system and a healthcare system, because there is this reactive approach to healthcare, not just in the US, but across the world. But now there's this movement towards being more proactive about your health. What have been the biggest barriers towards this for the last, let's say, few decades?
Yeah, I think there have been several barriers. I think some of it is the perverse nature of the healthcare system, where you have, insurance companies and medical professionals that are getting paid for procedures and not keeping people healthy. And that's a really hard thing to change. But also, I think there was just not a clear recognition of the factors that go in that impact you throughout your life course that contribute to this functional decline and disease. There's always been preventative medicine. There's always been, even your mother probably told you to eat healthy and exercise and sleep and something about your stress. But, it's been very hard to implement those things. And I think that's another challenge when it comes to lifestyle. We know generally what to tell people. We can argue for sure around the details, but we know generally what the people should do. But it's really hard to get people to change their lifestyle. And now I think we're understanding that, you know, this is a progression, it's a life course. And if we want to optimize people's health, and by the way, optimize their performance as well throughout the life course, we need to be working with people throughout that area. So in youth, we need to be doing a better job of educating people on what healthy lifestyles look like and what it means to be adopt those lifestyles rather than to get into bad habits that are hard to change. In adulthood, before people have any overt disease indications, we should be working with them to optimize not only their lifestyle, but maybe looking at their clinical chemistries and their micronutrient balance and trying to optimize these things throughout. In addition, I think that we can now start to look at supplements and drugs and other longevity interventions that are designed sort of to maintain the homeostasis or the health of your body. And if you can do that, you will prevent the onset of these diseases. So, typically, what's happened around the world is that you, at best, go in for a medical checkup every year. There's a very limited number of things that are tested. The doctors often have a very short amount of time. Many clinicians have already believed that trying to do preventative medicine doesn't work well. And so there's not enough influence put on health. And I think if these two things are connected, if we optimize health, you will have people that function better and live healthy longer and don't get these chronic diseases until much later.
It feels we've entered this perfect storm, as in we have a generation that is more sedentary than ever before. You've got sugar everywhere. When I was in the US just recently, you'd go into a pharmacy and you'd see aisles and aisles of sugary products, right? And then you've had COVID that's just happened, and it's made not just the older generation, but a younger generation realize how vulnerable they are as well. So do you think this is longevity's moment from being more of a niche movement or a movement that biohackers kind of embrace to being something that enters the mainstream?
Yeah, I think it is entering the mainstream. And for those reasons you just mentioned. And also, I think we have to take a step back and realize why all this has happened. I mean, high fructose corn syrup was probably a great thing. It saved a lot of people from starving decades and decades ago.
Hmm.
The problem is that our bodies are not adapted to dealing with overnutrition. Throughout our evolutionary history, we've done a great job of dealing with undernutrition because that's what we experience all the time. Periods of time without food, how your body reacts to that. But I think what we've noticed with overnutrition is your body doesn't know how to keep the set points where they are. And so, you find people that are eating 4,000 calories a day, which is twice as much as they should be eating, but their bodies adapted now to tell them that they need those calories. So they're feeling hungry when they don't eat them. And because we don't have those evolutionary safeguards on restoring nutrition in the face of overnutrition. So I think we're sort of living out of the context of what we evolved to live in, and that's what's creating all of these health challenges. Now, the good news is we're living long enough to get the chronic diseases. I mean, medical care has made a huge amount of progress on that front. But I think people have now realized that, that it's not healthy to eat too many calories, the wrong types of calories. Also, just the lifestyles we live are just very stressful. We're not getting enough sleep. My Whoop tells me every night I don't sleep enough. So the
Likewise here.
yeah, and so I think there's a growing recognition that this is happening. So you're seeing longevity clinics popping up like mushrooms all over the world, which is a good thing. But most of those are targeted toward, high middle income and high net worth people. What we really need is to figure out how to scale these interventions and to educate the entire public so that they demand this because this is a win-win. People are going to be healthy longer. They're going to function better. It's going to cost less. We'll save trillions of dollars globally and keep people healthy longer. There's no reason not to do this, but I still think there's a lot of education that has to happen. It's starting to happen. I see it more and more, but there's still a cutting edge of people that are really trying to do these longevity hacks and do things. But the majority of the people, even a lot of clinicians, are still not aware of what's going on, I think.
You seem to be able to connect lab to the clinic to just the general public. So we're seeing more of a movement of yourself and other longevity professors entering the market and teaming up with people in industry, etc. So if I were to ask you, what are the three main things I can do today, especially when it comes to products, treatments, uh, processes that would help me live a healthier, longer life, what would you recommend?
First thing we already mentioned, it doesn't have to be whoop, but measure.
Yeah.
Measure. Yeah. There are diagnostics out there, there are Aura rings, there are Garmin, every Apple Watches, everything is measuring your health parameters now. And I think a lot of them are giving you pretty good data back. And then on top of that, there are biologic aging clocks that you can send out blood or other biologic specimens to and get your biologic age back. Now, a lot of that is not fully validated science. It's still research, but I still think it's telling you meaningful information. I would also say that before you take a multivitamin, measure your vitamin levels. So many people don't do these things. And what we really want to do is optimize micronutrients and vitamins in an optimal range, not just give excess amounts to everybody, and which could cause its own problems. So know thyself is the first thing I would recommend. That can be difficult. It can be expensive sometimes. It's not always easy, but it's important. And then I do think that I keep harping on lifestyle today for some reason, but I think that it's an achievable goal for people to improve their lifestyle. Now, that doesn't mean vegan marathon runners who sleep 9 hours a day. What it means is taking a cold, hard look at your lifestyle practices, and then looking for small, sustainable changes that make you a little bit healthier. And if you can start to link those changes together, what you'll find is your lifestyle will improve, and you will see an outcome from that. I just started eating a healthier diet recently. I've always done a lot of exercise, but I started eating a healthier diet recently, and I've lost 10 pounds, and I feel better. It's not about 20 years from now whether I get sick. It's about feeling better now too. And so lifestyle, it works. It's not easy, but it works. Then I think that, there are a range of interventions out there that you can consider. And if you want to be one of the people that's on the cutting edge and not wait till everything's fully validated, and that comes with maybe a little bit of risk, but a lot of potential reward, although things might not work as well. There are people that are really jumping into that now, and that ranges from supplements that are, largely recognized as safe to drugs. A lot of people are taking rapamycin now. I can't officially recommend that, but I was just talking to Matt Kaberline, and I would guess that maybe up to 100,000 people are taking this off label now. Um, and other people are doing things like stem cells and other therapies as well. So there are a lot of things available. No one knows exactly what's going to work the best and which things are going to work the best in which people, but they're available now. And so if you're a little bit of an adventurer, educate yourself, try to work with people you can trust. And I think trying these things is interesting. I do a lot of them myself.
Before we get onto rapamycin and stem cells and peptides and all that, you're based in Singapore now, which is
Yeah.
known as this other blue zone. It has a government policy to try and extend health span and lifespan as much as possible. And I know attitudes around the world, from China to other Asian countries, varies with their approach to longevity compared to maybe in the US or in Europe as well. So, what are the key differences that you see in Singapore, especially from a government standpoint?
Yeah, I would say that first of all, governments to say that their approaches varies is probably not the right thing to say. That a better way of saying is they almost no country has a coherent approach to longevity right now, and everybody needs it. I mean, in the U.S., if you could extend health span by 3 years, it'd save tens of trillions of dollars over a 20-year period. So it's not just about quality of life; it's about saving your economy in the face of a rapidly aging population. So every government needs to look more into this. Singapore is very good at looking forward, and I think they recognize the demographic challenges they have very early, even before I got here 7 years ago. Um, they not only have one of the longest life expectancies in the world, but they have a very low and declining birth rate, which is now, going under one. And so you can imagine the number of older people's going up rapidly. It'll be over 25% and over the age of 65 in 5 years from now. Um, what to do about it? They've spent a lot of time thinking about. They have a lot of good things in place already. I think that there's a lot of effort to get people to live healthy. There for a small island state, there are a lot of parks, a lot of green space, and efforts to get exercise programs. The food is could be better, but it's healthier than American food. So, I think that a lot of things are in place already. Um, and that's part of the reason that it's considered a manufactured blue zone. It's not really a lot of those things weren't done to make people live longer. They were done because they help health, and the side effect is people are living longer. Now they're really trying to take a serious effort to target healthy longevity, and I think they're trying to understand what that means and what directions they want to go down. But I'm really looking for Singapore to take the next step and really be direct about trying to increase the health span of the population because this is an ideal place to do this. You have a population that largely trusts its government. You have, people that have access to interventions, good medical care, good quality of life. And so hopefully we can establish this island as a model for how to do healthy longevity going forward. I should say it's also small enough that you can institute systemic change. That if you look at a country like the U.S., it's a behemoth, with different states having different policies and private healthcare, and it's really hard to bring everybody together around a goal. Whereas in Singapore, that's much easier.
I remember seeing well, she was serving me. She must have been in her 70s, but this, uh, well, one of the core tenets of longevity is becoming purpose and work with purpose. But a lot of Singaporeans will end up working in quite social jobs, maybe in a restaurant or in a hawker center, because it's just a way to engage socially, but also have purpose later in life as well.
Yeah, that's great. I think I like in Singapore, you see that in the Grab drivers and taxi drivers. It's like Grab is like the Uber over here, and so I order a Grab and I get picked up in a Mercedes, and so I'm like start talking to the guy, and he's a retired engineer who's just trying to stay active, and he drives 3 days a week or something. So I think there's two components to that. One is that we need to stop ageism, and if people are still effective and enjoying their jobs, let them stay in the engineer job. But at the same time, encourage people to adopt second careers, go back, get education, retool people for another component of their life. And the last thing we want people to do is sitting on their couch. If they're playing golf, it's okay, but if they're watching golf, it's not going to work. So, I think we need to make sure that we empower the aging population so that they feel like they have a role to play and they're not just set aside and in Singapore there's this tendency and it's all of Asia really, this tendency for the sons and daughters of older people to take care of them and make decisions for them. And I'm always saying, especially here, let your parents go out and play. If they get lost, somebody will bring them back. This is the safest country in the world, or one of them. And so,
Yeah.
people mean well by doing that, but it's better to like leave as many decisions in the hands of people as they're getting older as possible. And if they can be productive in work and they want to, especially, great, let them do it because it'll only help them.
Do you think longevity has a PR problem?
I mean, we've been fighting a PR problem in longevity for a long time, and I don't know if I'm sure you've heard of Brian Johnson, and there's a special coming out on him in Netflix, and I have mixed feelings about what he's doing, but I think that he kind of reflects some of the problem that longevity is just for billionaires, and it's not. It's for 2 billion people that are going to be over the age of 65, and really for the whole population, not just the billionaires. And I think that that's one image problem we have in the field. And every time I talk, I'm saying that we're looking at scalable interventions to slow aging and scalable interventions or scalable diagnostics to measure aging, because we want this to be democratized. I think also there's just the aging field has had a lot of snake oil in the past, going back thousands of years. And so there's a tendency among the public and also some clinicians who, by the way, weren't taught anything about aging in medical school generally. I don't know why that happens. Why something that happens to every individual is not in the medical school curriculum is beyond me, but that's another topic. And so they just think that, aging is inevitable or it's only aesthetic, making you look better. And it's a continuing battle to get the message out that we really have the potential to change the health of people over the long term. And the benefits of that are, you know, multifactorial. And I think people are starting to get it, but there's still a lot of skepticism.
It's just where to start. You know, you mentioned measuring, and you've got just even in the measuring space, you have blood tests, and you have testing other biomarkers, and then you have MRI scans and DEX scans, and then you have VO2 max. And you mentioned biological age as a growing measurement of how healthy one is, right? And there are many biological age companies now, and sometimes the results vary quite widely as well. So, what benefit does one get, and what actionable insights could they receive from doing one of those tests?
Yeah, I think there are lots of different kinds of tests there. Like full body MRIs are really telling you if you have any lesions that look like early stages of disease. Um, I don't, in a way, that's not as much pure longevity as it is looking at early stage risk factors for disease, but it can be very useful, and there's challenges to that too, because there's a lot of false positives. So a lot of people get scared by this, and then turns out it's not something to worry about. I just had a DEXA scan. I thought that was really interesting to look at, you know, not just muscle and fat content, but how it varies in different limbs and things like that. VO2 max is a bit annoying to do, but it's also very important. So a lot of these functional parameters and imaging parameters, I think, are important. They're expensive. So, I think that the first question is, how much money do you have to spend on this? And again, this goes back to the democratization. You can go to a clinic that's top of the state of the art and spend $50,000 a year and measure a lot of things. And you'll get meaningful information back from that. However, most people don't want to spend that much money, and I understand that. I would say that at the very other end of the spectrum, making sure you go to the doctor every year, get the things you can get measured cheaply or for free done. Look at changes over time and see if metabolic changes are happening, that HbA1c is going up, cholesterol is going up, blood pressure. These are things we know about, and we're not doing a good enough job managing ahead of time. And so those are the two ends of the spectrum. The biologic aging clocks are in the middle. They're not as expensive, but I think it's hard to know which commercial companies that are to work with. And one thing to remember is that these clocks oscillate. So if you just take one time point, you might happen to do it when you're in the early stages of COVID and your biologic age is abnormally up. Um, None of them are perfect, I think, right now. But I do think you're getting information back from these biologic aging clocks that's meaningful. We just published a clinical chemistry clock that we haven't commercialized yet, but we're looking at ways to do that. And the nice thing about it is it uses standard clinical parameters that get measured all the time if you go to the doctor's office or the hospital, and we've been able to build an aging clock from those. They're great because things like HbA1c, there's a standard way to measure that in clinical labs around the world. There's a lot of consistency. One of the problems with DNA methylation is that my friend Matt Kaberlein, I keep bringing him up, sorry, was took his own blood and sent in multiple samples to one biologic age company that does methylation. including taking the same sample and splitting it into two and not labeling it with the same person and sending it in. And the results were all over the place. And so, even for something like DNA methylation, reproducible experiments is can be a challenge. So, it's not perfect right now. Okay, I don't think I can say there's one way to do things. I like some of the clocks, like the Dunedin pace of aging clock. I like the methylation clocks that are second generation that predict outcomes like mortality rather than predict chronologic age. I think those are can be valuable. But I don't think anyone knows what the best clock is at the moment, and that's probably going to be even if we knew it wouldn't be the right answer 2 years from now, because this field is emerging so quickly that I have trouble keeping up with all the clocks coming out, and we make our own too. So I should know, but there's something published almost every day on biologic aging clocks now.
Thanks for tuning in. If you're enjoying the podcast so far, please feel free to hit the subscribe button below. It makes a huge difference. Now, let's get back to the episode. So, Brian, earlier on you mentioned the wild west of longevity supplements, rapamycin and a few other protocols that individuals are taking. This is very much still a niche group of people that are being, I think you mentioned daredevils earlier on, or daring in their approach to this. But
Daring, I would say, maybe not so far as daredevils.
okay, but what do you currently take?
Yeah, so I take this product Rejuven, and I'm on the board of the company. I did a lot of research for them, so full disclosure. But it has alpha ketoglutarate and low dose vitamin A if you're a male, or low dose vitamin D if you're a female. And that's based on a lot of animal studies and increasing human data that we've collected that suggests that especially the AKG, but particularly the combination, can impact biologic age. And then I experiment with a lot of other things. And one of the things that I do is I don't take six things at once because we don't know how they're going to interact with each other. And even if we did, if we see efficacy, we can attribute that to which combination of things. So I usually do like a 3 to 4 month regimen of another supplement. I've been doing sublingual NAD lately. I'm not even sure that's on the market yet, but it's a company that makes that. And it's intriguing because um, if you take NMN or NRs, precursors for NAD, a very small percentage of it through the oral delivery route gets into the bloodstream. And so how much you're really raising NAD levels is debatable. Whereas if you take a sublingual NAD directly under the tongue, the NAD goes directly into the bloodstream, and I think it's a much better dosing regimen. And I think the AKG and the NAD together have really improved my exercise performance. I'm still trying to understand why. I'm getting ready to test astaxanthin, which is another supplement that has shows pretty good data. I've tried mesenchymal stem cells and a few other things. So I'm pretty daring in that front, but I don't do 50 things at once. I think that that's perhaps taking a little bit too much risk for me.
Yeah, just talking about false positives and mixing supplements together. I was taking a creatine supplement and ended up having quite high creatinine levels after doing a blood test. But I realized that could have just been a false positive because I could have been doing quite a heavy workout beforehand. So,
Yeah.
what would you recommend in terms of stacking supplements? Because I am also kind of conscious of mixing supplements together, but also trying to maximize the the results I'm getting from my blood tests as well, because it's so difficult to measure what you're putting together and realizing, okay, is it this stack that's improving my health, or is it this stack that's raising this thing?
I can't predict which three things are going to work together in a mouse.
Mm.
So we're really on the edge here when we start mixing things together. And I think that if I combine two different interventions that affect longevity in a mouse, the most often outcome is they tend to cancel each other out. And I think one way to think about that is that a lot of the interventions, for instance, impact the mTOR pathway either directly or indirectly. And you don't want to hit that pathway too hard. You need to turn down basal signaling of that pathway, but it still needs to be induced at certain times in your body. If you hit it too hard, you're going to get negative outcomes. And so, um, yeah, I still think it's research to know how to combine things together. I would say that look at outcomes. If you're taking a supplement, uh, it's great if you pay really close attention to your body and you're seeing differences. The reason I like the NAD so much, and I was skeptical when I started taking it, was that my endurance performance has gone up dramatically. And it was acute, really. It's probably better vascular oxygen flow or something like that. I'm still trying to figure out what's happening, but that has knock-on effects, right? Because if you're suddenly exercising better, then you're exercising more and you're getting more out of your exercise in return. And so there's a feed forward positivity there. So, I really like things where I notice a difference when I take them. And so some of it's very subjective. There are placebo effects, but that one was really acute. I was on a treadmill and I was running faster without breathing hard. um, yeah, it's really hard to placebo that. And then I didn't even realize I wasn't even thinking about the NAD. It took me like 2 hours later. I'm like, wait a minute, I just started taking a supplement. And when I go off of it, the effect goes away. So that's ideal when you're seeing something in your performance. I think that performance and long-term health are about largely overlapping. Now, you can over push performance and do things that hurt your long-term health. So I don't want to say they're completely overlapping, but for most people trying to optimize exercise performance, cognitive performance is probably a good thing long-term as well, as long as you're not too far out there.
So you've got stem cells, you've got peptides that are making a lot of noise at the moment, and you've got a new health secretary coming in the US, RFK, who is looking to potentially lax some regulations around that. How bullish are you on stem cells, on peptides, on psychedelics as well on the mental health side in the US?
I have mixed feelings about RFK.
Okay.
I think we need to change how we do regulatory procedures in the U.S. I think they're too rigid, and some of the things he says on that front, I think, are intriguing. The devil's a bit in the details, how you do it. I would like to see um, more flexibility in a lot of things. Um, I think that peptides they recently have been making them harder to use in the U.S. And I'm not sure that's a good thing. He also talks a lot about problems with vaccines and autism and things that I think are crazy. So I'm just going to wait and see on RFK.
So I would say I'm pretty involved in longevity. It's an area that I'm passionate about and I do a lot of things. But when I look at the booklet of the number of peptides out there and GLP-1s and all
Yeah.
that, it just completely confuses me as someone who's actually in the space as well or getting more and more into the space. Where do you start? What do you think would be the number one thing to go to? We've heard about GLP-1 microdosing becoming more of a thing. We've heard about peptides helping with inflammation and all that.
Yeah, it's so crazy now that I can't keep up with all of it. I was recently doing a podcast and said somebody wrote in and said, "What do you think about Moldovan dragon head for longevity?" And I'm like, I have no idea what that is. It turns out to be a tea. I think that the peptides especially are getting way ahead of knowledge and even my knowledge, and so there's so many of them out there and the efficacy is going to depend on the peptide. So I think some of them show some very interesting data, but most of them I would not say are fully validated yet. You mentioned GLP, and I would say this. I think if you're overweight, I have no problems. Anything to get you from obese back to normal weight is probably going to help you with aging, or most things anyway. I think we still don't know in a healthy population that's not overweight whether uh, um, SGLT inhibitors or GLP agonists are going to be helpful in the long term or not. And I would caution that if you're doing those things, measure your muscle mass. I think anything that's causing a reduction in muscle mass is not going to be good long term for aging. And some of these drugs have that property at different dosing regimes. So that's something to be very, very careful of. Actually, I can't study this here, but I think psychedelics are probably very beneficial for longevity. Um, I think they're really good for anxiety and stress, and they have if used appropriately, and they have long-term properties that with very limited dosing. So we're very interested in what the benefits there might be. I think that's another problem in the longevity field is that most of the people in the field are better at understanding what's going on below the neck than above the neck. But we all know that your attitude, your mindset, your anxiety, your behavior are defined above the neck. And things that improve your outlook on life, reduce your stress, maybe get you outside of your own ego a little bit, are probably going to be good for you in the long term. So I would love to see a lot more research on psychedelics.
When you think about the research being done in your labs, in David Sinclair, Aubrey DeGray's labs, is there anything that really excites you that you think is going to significantly or radically extend lifespan right now?
Yeah. Well, I think there's been a revolution in two areas. One of them is the clocks. We mentioned that, and I'll just come back to this clinical chemistry clock that we can predict mortality 20 years out very well now using AI-driven clock to predict biologic age. And I think that the nice thing about that is it's actionable if it's done on a principal component strategy. And so if you have a high biologic age, you can figure out which component is affected. Those components are composed of things like HbA1c or inflammatory markers or, smoking. So, it may not be the most mechanistic clock, but what we're finding is that hospitals get it and they want to use it, and it's a way to get biologic age into the clinic and into the hospital. So we're putting a lot of effort in my lab on AI and diagnostics right now. You were talking more about interventions, though. I think that there's a lot of promise out there. I'm not sure what I think about people doing the gene therapy right now, but gene therapy has a tremendous amount of promise to affect aging. We've been doing a lot of work on identifying which genes control the aging process in preclinical models. There's a lot of reason to believe that many of those will be conserved in humans. And the more that, as we can do more and more effective, safe gene therapy, that's going to open up a whole new avenue, I think, to have bigger effects on longevity than maybe even than the drugs will. Um, I think there's a lot of promise in stem cells. We need more rigorous data to really figure out which stem cell approaches are affecting biologic age the most. But I believe they're having an impact on age. I'm still excited about rapamycin. It's the gold standard. I think that there's increasing data that it can affect aging in humans, and it can be used very safely, I think. And then I think I would mention reprogramming as well because I really see a decline in adult stem cell function as a big driver in aging. And if you can reprogram cells back to a more stem-like safe in a safe way, um, the impact there may be quite large. That may be some time away, or we still have safety concerns with those strategies, but there's a lot of things on the horizon now. There's 1,000 drugs in the drug age database that are thought to maybe affect aging. And I think we need to move from having all these candidates to getting validated interventions in humans, and then beyond that to precision to know which people are going to respond to which interventions. Right now, we're not there. And I kind of, I think one thing he talks about is that you can do lifestyle change and buy more time, and then that'll give you more time for scientists to make further discoveries, and you can buy more time, and etc. Kind of like this escape velocity concept. Um, and I agree with him. But I think some of the early things that are going to hit widespread use are going to be supplements, maybe rapamycin, because we just have more information about those. They may not be the biggest effect out in the end, but it may be the intermediate stage between lifestyle and the big effects.
So if I were to give you that crystal ball, a magic crystal ball that I've just pulled out of my pocket, and going to the year, let's say 2030, which is 5 years from now, you mentioned rapamycin and stem cells and the intermediate step to something even more out there and revolutionary. Where will we be in 2030?
I think in 5 years will hopefully be much more widespread use of supplements and more validation that they work, maybe wider spread use of rapamycin and other drugs, maybe GLP agonists, maybe metformin. There's a lot of other drugs out there that, in fact, a lot of the drugs that treat early stage risk factors for disease, there's some evidence they affect aging as well, beta blockers, statins. And one of the outcomes from our clinical chemistry clock is that optimally medicating people so that the people that are taking medications for disease indications that have very optimal clinical parameters live longer than people that we call healthy that don't have any disease indications. And so that suggests we should be more aggressive about optimizing these parameters earlier in life. And hopefully we'll start to see more of that by 2030. I'm hoping also that we'll have a much better, things will be much further along in clinical trials to get validation. And that, by that I mean the stem cells. The gene therapy that's being done right now, a lot of it is through IRBs. They're effectively clinical trials, and data is being collected. So hopefully we'll have those things closer to understanding whether they're safe and whether they really have a bigger effect than some of the things that you can do now. So, um, I think we'll start to see things moving very quickly now. We need to keep that momentum up, and I started a consulting company because we're trying to work with different sectors of this longevity landscape to try to just mainly be supportive of what people are trying to do. There's so many good ideas out there, and getting funding for it is still difficult. And so we're really trying to do what we can to move this field forward as fast as possible. I think it's clearly needed.
I was posting a few days ago on we're seeing the proliferation of information and videos on longevity, right? There was a new documentary on Amazon Prime and Netflix
Yeah.
another streaming site just in the space of 2 weeks. So there's now more attention coming into the space. But do you foresee an inflection point maybe in this year in 2025 or next year where longevity really has its moment, where more funding, more talent comes in?
I think we're on this. We're already on the long part of the growth curve. It's been happening for a few years now, and every year things get more and more um, um, move faster and faster and get bigger and bigger. And I can see that just by my schedule. So it's and it's good to be in. It's good that this is happening and that I'm in demand. I'm not complaining, but it's starting to be a lot. The but overall, I think that when you look back 10 years ago, there was still very little that was happening, and now it's hard to keep track of everything that's happening. I think in the company in the private sector space, we're at this point where in the diagnostic space or in the biotech space or in the clinical space, we have all these different companies that are doing things. There are clinics everywhere. There are biomarkers now, lots of companies. And then there's biotech companies. Longevity might be the fastest growing sector. Um, but for the most part, they're all small companies with ideas that are trying to secure funding to get to the next step. And I think in the next 5 years, you'll start to see some companies emerge in those areas and start to become leaders in the field. Now, in the biotech side, you have already big companies that started big too, like Altos and Calico, and it'll be interesting to see what they do as well. But I predict you're going to get companies in these areas that started small and become big, and I think those will be really interesting to figure out. They're good investment opportunities, but again, it's hard to pick which are going to be the winners right now.
Funny, we were talking about our wearables earlier on and our sleep scores, but in the context of the work that you do, what keeps you up at night?
I think it's this balancing the fact that we're still doing research, but we're now doing it in humans. And the clinics are doing all kinds of different things. Nobody has the protocols for how to do everything right. And so, when I work with clinics, I'm really trying to think hard about how do we balance safety, um, and efficacy, and potential efficacy. I mean, and I think it's really important for clinics to be saying, all right, this put a high bar on safety no matter what we try to do, and also to be transparent and not lie to people about what the outcome's going to be. So, take anything, stem cells. There's a lot of potential. I can give you a lot of reasons why it might affect your aging. The data's not all in yet, and so we have to be honest about that with people. So, it's a challenge when you have a rapidly growing clinical space, but neither the diagnostics or the interventions are fully validated. And so how do you walk that tightrope and not hurt people and learn about what works and get it to as many people as possible? I'm not anti-clinic, by the way. I think it's good that it's happening, but there there people are taking risks in various areas, and hopefully those are balanced to reward and reasonable risk to take.
At what point does that risk become acceptable? So let's look at rapamycin or any of the therapeutics you've been talking about, or stem cells or other peptides, etc. Does it need a large human clinical trial to allow it to enter the mainstream? Or, yeah, at what point does someone like myself say, yeah, this is worth taking?
Yeah, I think that's a couple different questions there. I would never be against large clinical trials to validate things. I think we should be doing that. Having said that, take rapamycin as an example. I think for healthy individuals, and notice I said healthy, not people that have immune problems and other things. Um, I don't think it's particularly risky. There was just a study published with it was feedback people for about 400 people taking rapamycin provided, and the only thing that people noticed that was above background as a side effect was mouth sores. And that's kind of the canary in the coal mine with rapamycin. They're annoying, but they go away. And so to me, that's a tolerable risk. I think everybody has to decide what risks they want to take, though. Again, it comes back to empowering people to make their decisions. Do you want to be at that stage where you see potential benefits and you're willing to take a little bit of risk, or do you want to wait until the big studies are done? And that has to be an individual choice. Um, but a drug like rapamycin has had this very bad reputation for side effects. But now that we're using it in healthy people, they're very minimal, I think. Um, so I think it's gonna depend on each particular intervention. They're all going to have their own risk and rewards. And ideally, especially when somebody takes the time and effort to go to a longevity clinic, they're being informed adequately, and they're being allowed to make the decisions that they think are best for them. I mean, like these things are already happening. Look at testosterone supplementation.
Hmm.
Um, your testosterone goes down with age. Most men's testosterone goes down. Um,
Most men.
the NIA did a huge trial on this supplementing testosterone, and they saw a small increase in prostate cancer risk and said it's a bad idea. Um, it also maintains, body composition, muscle mass, potentially vigor. I think that there's a difference also between restoring it to levels that probably where you were when you were young and taking way too much. This to me is an individual decision what people want to do. It's not something the doctor should decide. Ideally, the doctor is giving them the information and letting them decide. I think if you empower patients or clients, they will make decisions and then they will adhere to those decisions much better. If we just have doctors saying you need to do this and not that, they're not invested in that decision. And even when you give them a statin, the compliance rate is like 40% or 50%. So I think if we can really turn it around and let people make the decisions, within reason, of course, then we'll get much better compliance and better outcomes.
The pursuit to find the elixir of life has been one that has been part of the human psyche for thousands of years. And what we're starting to imagine now is a completely different approach to how society might look, right? And I think there is clearly an ethical question. I can imagine, Mr. Olympia, bodybuilders at 100, winning the competition, and having 90-year-old grandmas that look like 20-year-old. So it
Sounds okay
are
to
you
me.
are you starting to have those conversations with governments as to how society could look? When does the ethical question become part of the conversation?
Well, let's evaluate this on the scale of the effect, right? I think a lot of the interventions right now, if they work, they're going to modestly slow aging, maybe give you 5 or 10 years extra health span. It's not even clear that they're going to extend maximum lifespan, at least with the interventions we have now. They may or they may not. We don't know. It's a debate. I think we can all tolerate that. Squaring the curve, getting more people out to the maximum, keeping them healthy longer, that's a win-win. Then there's like take stopping aging. Not possible yet. Is it maybe possible? Maybe. Um, if we stopped aging today, there would be no 200-year-old people for 81 years. This is not going to be the most rapid change that you'll ever see. And I think there's time to adjust to it. So I'm not as worried about that. Uh, Now let's take the third example, which is reversing aging. And then, your 90-year-old grandmother walks in tomorrow and looks 20. That's a dramatic change to society, and that will have societal implications. I don't think we're in danger of doing that anytime in the near future, so I'm not terribly worried about it. But if you could really reverse aging, you would really have those ethical issues you have to resolve. But I think even if you're just stopping it, the changes are going to be slow enough that we'll adapt to it. And hopefully there are a lot of other technological changes too that go together that make it a world a better place to live in. I'm not worried about the population problem and things like that. The population is going to be going down by the time people, and so I think that, um, yeah, if I could take a pill and be 25 again, and everybody did that, that would be interesting.
Mm.
So, yeah.
Because, as you mentioned, we think of overpopulation, but as countries become more developed, then birth rates go down, and population is set to, I think, peak in 2080, if I'm not
Yeah,
mistaken. That was the
something like
last.
that. Yeah.
Yeah, brilliant.
But I may be faster than that. It's going down faster than people can imagine the birth rate, I think. So, it's striking how fast it's going down in Southeast Asia and East Asia, and really in other parts of the world too. Yeah, I don't think that's the major concern, but yeah, yeah, it'll be interesting if really large effects can be achieved, or aspects of aging can truly be reversed, then we have to have some discussions. I can still think it's probably good, but we have to have some discussions. So,
It's funny because we hear from when you mention reversing aging and you say maybe it's possible in the context of the grandma. It's a maybe now, but just a few years ago, it was an absolutely no. So it
yeah,
feels like the needle is changing so, it's moving so fast. And it feels that, especially with the age of AI and what could possibly happen with technology in the next 5 to 10 years, that reversing aging for all could be a possibility within the next few decades.
yeah, I mean, it's hard to predict how the rate of things are moving. I would guess it's going to take longer than that, but no one knows. And you're right, things are speeding up. And I think it's making the future very unpredictable. I'm not dystopian about it. I don't particularly worry about it that much, but I think that we're going to have a lot of societal changes. Like, how many people need to work in 20 years? There's, yeah, how do you give people money if they're not working? There are a lot of big changes we may have to deal with, and reversing aging would just be one of them. Uh, it's all going to have to be looked at in a context. So I think it's hard to imagine what that looks like right now. But I haven't seen an animal model where we can reverse aging yet. And so I don't want to underestimate AI, but there's nothing on the horizon there that appears imminent. Let's put it that way.
Brian, before we finish, is there anything that you want to add?
Yeah, I just think it's important that people engage. This is for your own good. We know a lot about aging now. There are affordable strategies that can move the needle in terms of how you feel now and how you're going to feel 10 or 20 years from now. Um, it's not consensus. You can't just go to your doctor and get a prescription for it, but the knowledge is out there, and you know, do everything you can do to achieve it, because if you can live 5 extra healthy years, what's the value of that to you?
Brian, thank you so much for your time. It's been a pleasure.
It's my pleasure. Anytime.
Thanks for listening to the Beyond Tomorrow podcast. Your support helps this journey reach more people. So if you've enjoyed it, please share, subscribe, or leave a review. See you next time.